Um,
Did Illy explain the Yoda thing at all?
no, I don't think so.
I just saw
My
the.
Twitch is being super. It wasn't letting me unmute to test it. Like there wasn't even coming up an option to
Huh?
mute or unmute. Dude, what the fuck? I can't unmute it to see how I sound. When I hover my mouse over the screen, there's just nothing there.
Huh?
I guess I'll just have to test YouTube. YouTube sounds fine and it's popping up for me.
I'll look at the Twitch just in case.
When I refresh Twitch, like I see the icon show up and it's muted, and I'm like clicking where it is, and nothing's happening. Show up and it's muted. I can't even pause it if I wanted to pause it.
Yeah, it's working for me. You sound fine.
All right. Well, we're with you, I guess.
You're about to. If you were on the YouTube stream, you're about to hear yourself.
Join Preston Byers and me for episode 145 of the Ego Chall Podcast. Getting you ready for this weekend CDL online qualifier matches. Live now, links below. Sweet. We got a HBR Classic this weekend, so I had to go with a nade shot gif.
No.
What do you mean no?
I mean, I hope the LA Thieves haven't gotten off the game since Sunday.
I just checked the COD wiki and they changed the shit to Yoda too. That's so funny.
This isn't a meme, right? Like, it's something he was actually doing, right?
Yeah, and then he said he tweeted if it hits 20K likes, he'll change it back, and it like just hit 21,000.
Yeah, I
Like
mean, he
recently.
changed the Twitch too, so that's serious.
Yeah.
All right, you ready to get started?
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to episode 145 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we are talking about qualifying matches for the first time in about a year and a half. It feels like we have some qualifying matches to talk about in the Call of Duty League. We also have some stuff that we didn't necessarily talk about in the last podcast. Some of the news and notes that happened over maybe the last week or two that we just couldn't fit into that monster of an episode. But we'll get to it in this episode. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
Yeah, doing all right. Like you said, we got the qualifiers coming back up, so we do have some decent stuff to talk about. It shouldn't be as long of an episode and as action packed as last time around, but should be a good one nonetheless.
Yeah, so something we didn't talk about on the last episode that actually happened before Sunday was the news that Major 2, which is being hosted by Optic Texas down in Texas, will not feature a Challengers Open bracket. So for some of the other majors, and historically, these CDL events have been accompanied by the Challengers events, which have 60, 80, 100 teams in them, and that actually gives those Challengers players something to look forward to other than the elites and some of the cups that they play online. I guess, what are your thoughts and reaction to this particular major 2, which would be, I think, like the end of March, if I'm not mistaken. This one will, as far as we know at this point, will not have a Challengers event.
Yeah, and to be clear too, based on what we know, it seems like it's on the league almost. I mean, you can't put it entirely on the league, I guess, but based on this, this is news came from a clip on January 8th of Hex in Zuma's stream, and Hex says the CDL is not interested in giving us a subsidy to host a Challengers event, so we're not hosting Challengers at our event. So you can look at that in multiple ways, right? You can say like, yeah, the league isn't, you know, giving Optic financial assistance to host an event, but obviously if Optic wanted to host a challengers section of the event out of its own dime, then they could do that, but at the same time they don't want to do that, and you can't really blame them, right? Especially if we know historically how much these events cost to run and everything like that. So whichever way you want to look at it in terms of this not happening, it's just the cut and dry version of it is that there at this point it seems like there won't be a challengers event, and I think that this is just like I don't want to say it's the final nail in the coffin, but it's certainly another nail in a coffin that is slowly building in the challenger scene.
Mm-hmm.
Um, especially just the way champs happened last year as that optic event, and that had its own drama with people saying like home field advantage for champs and yada yada, all that stuff. But just regardless of all that, just the reception around that event and how much people seem to enjoy it and how well uh, it seemed to go and all that stuff, like it seemed like that was like a good building block for the league in terms of seeing like, wow, this is what we can have for our events. Like almost like I don't want to say like it puts it on a pedestal, but it's like, that's just sort of like what the league could look at that and be like, an optic run champs went really well. What can we do to elevate future optic events? And obviously I actually was there challengers in some capacity at champs last year. Well, I mean, there was a challengers champs, but I don't think it was there.
I actually can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't remember either. But regardless, let's just pretend there wasn't, because I really don't remember. I feel like that's something like, okay, if Optics hosting an event that's not champs this year, this is speaking from a league perspective right now, you could sit back and be like, okay, Optic hosts this banger event for champs. What can we do to take that to the next level? Oh, we can get even more people involved if we if we help Optic host a challengers event. And it is weird to sit here and talk about all these semantics and stuff. We don't know the numbers involved and how much it costs to run these events, how much it costs to run a pro event plus challengers event versus just running a pro event. We can assume it is a lot of money, and that's gotta be part of the reason. Like obviously, if it made financial sense for Optic to be able to do a challengers event on its own, even based on what we know of Hex and some of his, just his standing in the community, like even if it was going to be at a slight loss to him, it feels like it would be something he would make happen if he wanted to make it happen. But at the end of the day, it just at this point it sounds like that you can't blame him at the same time for wanting to get help from the league if they want to make it happen. If the league isn't willing to help make it happen, why would Hex go out of his way to try and do that when Optic doesn't have a challengers team? Probably a different story if Scump wanted to have a challengers team like we've talked about before, and the Optic Dynasty was competing in challengers. I'm pretty sure Hex would push a little bit more to host a challengers event, but end of the day, we don't know all the details around what's going on, what's all those talks behind closed doors and all that. All we know right now is at this point that clip was from January 8th. As of January 8th, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a challengers event at Major 2, which means there's even fewer challengers events than there already were. And I don't even know how many there were going into this point, but we know there weren't a ton. So that, like I said, it's just another, it's another nail in the coffin, not the final one, but it's certainly, got to be discouraging for some of these challengers players who are just putting so much time into trying to get their shot again, and just going to make it that much harder for them.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the calendar, and I want to apologize to anybody listening, I am getting sick. I'm not fully sick, so if we have a Sunday episode, I might sound like on my desk door or something, but But yeah, challengers. So we're having 4 majors this season, and then champs in the CDL. So challengers never has more events than that. So at most, we would have had 5 events, 4 challengers opens, and then the final challenger finals, which I think are top 16 invitational. So at most, we would have had 5. Now at most, we have 4. That's not a guarantee whatsoever that we get 4 in total. Um, and you said that it's kind of another nail in the coffin. I mean, there's got to be 1,000 nails in that coffin right now. Like, this is, we even talked about it when we did our wish list or the New Year's resolutions. There's just no support for challengers, and there doesn't seem to be a plan for challengers whatsoever. I haven't seen anything from the CDL. I haven't really seen anything from the community as a whole as a legitimate plan for how challengers should operate moving forward, because it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And not talking about the talent, I think the talent has improved by and large, and we still see a lot of great challengers players come into the CDL and make an impact, but the infrastructure and the support for the challenger scene has decreased year over year. And it wasn't great to begin with. So it just seems like eventually we're going to get to the point. I don't want this to happen, but I think it's an inevitability at this point that the CDL or Activision or Microsoft just says, screw it. Like, we're not going to support a path to pro scene at all. There's going to be a different, it's not under our umbrella. Like, if anybody wants to kind of create their own path to pro or their own minor leagues of sort, then they can do that. But Microsoft is not going to have anything to do with that. And I think that is the way it will be eventually. I don't know how quickly that will happen, but it is let's just say it, like, it's a burden for Microsoft. It's a burden for the CDL. They don't want to do anything with it. They don't do anything more than they have to. And they don't really have to do much to begin with, because who's going to hold them accountable and tell them, no, you need to have a Challengers Open for the Optic Texas event? You need to have all of these events for every major, and you need to really support it online, and in terms of viewership and making sure that eyeballs are put onto this product. They don't do any of that, which it sucks, because I forget who said it, but it's been said quite a bit across the community. The next era of CDL players are in challengers for the most part. Of course, there are players that are 18 and they turn 18 and then they're automatically in the CDL, so they don't technically get to play in any of those challengers events. But if you look across the CDL, a lot, I would guess the majority of them have been in challengers at one point in time, or the equivalent, I guess, if you're older than you started before 2020, but like, you were in that minor league and moved your way up to the major leagues. And I think it sucks, especially considering there was no real challenger scene for a while. It was just all connected to the pro scene. Like, you would have these major the MLG events where there's, I don't know how many teams there were, like 120 at some point, and these massive open brackets, and you got to, if you were no name and you didn't have any money, you never made anything in Call of Duty, you could go and you could beat a bunch of teams, and then you could be considered pro, and you could be a part of the elite group in COD esports. And then that's just not a thing that happens anymore. Like, you really can only get scouted and discovered if you're scrimming pro teams now. Like, I don't think that there's any other way, for the most part, that people can get discovered in a meaningful way. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but it doesn't seem like we have a real good system. And I think if you look at any professional sports league, they are all very serious about their minor league system, or whatever the equivalent it is. Like, the NFL has college football, like something they don't have to deal with. Like, it's a completely separate thing, but they sure use the hell out of it. The NBA has college basketball, but even they were like, we need something else, like a buffer in between. So they have the G League. Obviously, you're a huge baseball fan. MLB has the most extensive minor league system of any American sports league. And it works for them. It certainly works, and it's not profitable all the time. We've seen that with minor league baseball and the restructuring that's happened over the last few years. But it's necessary to have. It's a necessary evil. It's a necessary burden, and it's a necessary cost for a legitimate esports league like the CDL. They have to have those minor leagues.
Yeah, and while you were just talking there, I was trying to look to just for more transparency. I mean, most longtime listeners of the Ego Chall Podcast know we definitely don't focus on challengers. There were definitely previous years where I myself, I won't speak for Preston, but I get a pretty good sense that, in previous years, Preston and I both knew a little bit more about challengers than, some people or your average CDL fan. But I would say in recent years, that's definitely not true for either of us. As the years have gone on, we haven't kept up with challengers as much as in previous years. And I'm trying to look right now. I can't even find a schedule, and I don't even know if there's a challengers event at Major One in Madrid. So like this might not even be exclusive to just this Major Two thing. That this what if the CDL is saying like they're not going to be helping these franchises host a challengers event in any of the majors this year? Then is there no challengers lands? Like I'm trying to find this information. I can't seem to find like anything on the actual schedule outside of the elites. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure. But while you were also talking there about you kind of, it's not necessarily directly on topic with what we were talking about, but you kind of mentioned like the former system and people getting their chance through like open bracket and all that stuff. And that reminded me of something Hastro tweeted on January 11th. Obviously, Hastro hasn't been involved as much from the esports perspective in recent years as he was previously, but he's the former uh, owner slash CEO of Team Envious. I believe that was his title. Well, on Jan 11th, he tweeted, "Without the MLG Pro Circuit, competitive Halo and Call of Duty are fragments of what they once were. What's the solution? It's definitely not league reserved for a few teams, but probably the open ecosystem that once flourished and gave every team, pro or am, a chance to shine." And I really think that's just we've talked about the quote unquote good old days or the glory days, however you want to phrase it, of those MLG events where you have your 16 team pool play, 4 pools of 4, and then one team gets seeded in from the open bracket where it's just a pit of 100 plus teams competing for 4 spots for just the chance to play against these pro teams. And in some cases, the team would go into a pool and it would be the pool of death and they would go 0-4 and just get smoked. But they at least had a chance to, play against some of the pros and get better. Well, then there are those few chances where some of these teams get brought up into pool play and they're able to beat some of these other pro teams and cause some drama and make some stuff happen. So I don't know what the answer is. We talked about that on our wish list episode, like a possible expansion helping us get back to like a 16 team league that would have 4 pools of 4 or something similar to those MLG events. And then maybe if expansion helps lead into a system where we get more of those pro-ams, which is something else we talked about, yada yada. So it's kind of talking in circles here, but that just your spiel reminded me of that Hastro tweet, so I wanted to read that off.
And I don't know what the perfect system is. I don't think anyone has the perfect system, but I think esports, more so than traditional sports in America, should look to like European soccer as kind of a model they can base some of the operations on. I know you're not a huge soccer fan, and neither am I. But like, look at English soccer, for example. They have the Premier League, which, if I'm not mistaken, is like the top 20 teams in England. And I think the bottom 2 teams, I could be wrong. So if you're English or a big Premier League fan, please don't come at my neck too hard. But as far as I know, it's 20 teams. They're considered the top flight, the top league in England. And, one of the one of the most popular leagues in the world. But they have 20 teams, and then I think the bottom two teams from the season get relegated to the second league, and then the top two teams from the second league will get promoted for the next season. And I think that is a good system for the CDL to kind of base their motto on. I don't know what the number is. If they want to keep it at 12, that's fine. I think that's a little restrictive because the talent has gotten greater. I think 16 is probably the sweet spot because that's traditionally what Call of Duty has done. 16 teams is kind of, and it fits into a bracket perfectly. You can split it into 4 groups of 4. So it's just a nice round number for everybody to attach themselves to. But I think promotion and relegation has to be coming back, and especially if you're not going to have these expansion fees, which you can't really do promotion and relegation to the same level if you're having expansion fees, especially the ones that were so restrictive of like 25, 30, 35 million dollars that obviously didn't end up happening. But that can't really be a thing in the promotion and relegation, but it would certainly liven up at least the top part of challengers and get some of these organizations that aren't currently involved and don't see a reason to get involved in challengers. What point is it for, let's just for example say Team Liquid? Why would they ever get involved in challengers? What is the point? What's the payoff for a team like that to say, I'm going to give these guys a chance to represent our organization? What is the end goal? That they win challengers events? Like, nobody really pays attention to those events, and you're never going to make your money back. And not saying that CDL teams necessarily make their money back, but at least if you're in the CDL, there are sponsors, there are whatever live streaming rights that they get. There's something, there's the attention, there's at least the prestige of being in that top level. Challenges has none of that, and there's no reason for these organizations to get involved, and they don't get involved. So there has to be some kind of connection between challengers and the CDL, or just completely blow it all up and just go back to the system that we were already with previously before the CDL, which the CWL wasn't the best format either. So there's always room for improvement, but it certainly needs to be improved at some point, and hopefully some point in the future, near future. Next up, we should talk about Yoda is his name. So Illy, I don't know if this was just on a whim, if this was something that he had really been considering, thinking long and hard about, but he tweeted a few days ago that he was changing his name from Illy to Yoda. And he followed this up by changing his Twitter handle to Yoda King with, I think, 2 underscores. He also changed his Twitch account to Yoda King. It sucks. I all respect to Illy, the Pope, but yeah, it stinks. It's bad. This is also not a new thing, and I don't know what the hell is going on, but we saw this with Crimsix when the CDL started. He thought it was a good idea to go to C6. He's only the best Call of Duty player of all time, and he thought a good rebrand right when we were going to the CDL would be a good idea. Kenny also tried the same thing. He went by Quavo for a little bit. I don't think any of these have worked. I think the most successful rebrand, maybe I'm missing a few, but is probably Crowder. He was Replays originally, and he went by Crowder. I still call him Replays on accident a few times, but but by and large, people know him by Crowder now. I can't think of any others that have worked out. This certainly won't work out, and people have let Yoda hear it, I guess. Your thoughts? Are you in love with Yoda King?
No, not really. I'm trying to think of some other rebrands before we get to it. The one that's sticking out, and obviously it's not along the same lines, but obviously Simp was previously Simp the sick joke or whatever, and it was like simply a sick joke, and that's when it shortened to Simp, and that was before Simp had another meaning. So that was kind of an unfortunate shortening, if you want to classify it as that. But what's his the other one that for a long time Call of Duty fans is obviously Parasite, previously went by Caramel.
That's before my time.
And then Ricky, what was Ricky's? Discoverable, I think was Ricky's. So there have been some other ones, and I definitely am one fan of Ricky going by Ricky. Especially because when you say Ricky in a Killa voice, or just think about Killa saying Ricky's name, it's
Ricky.
it's kind of funny. Um, but back on topic here with Illy. I think there's a couple ways to look at this. I think from a less serious perspective, I'm definitely more of a fan of Illy. I think, Yoda King or Yoda is kind of funny, and we were talking with head Ego Chall correspondent Tremor. At least I was earlier, and he was like, I think he's just bored and he's doing this. So we don't know how serious it is, and obviously he ended up tweeting too, like, this tweet gets 20,000 likes. I'll go back to Illy, and as of us recording, I think it's at 21,000 likes. So just recently hit it. Um, let me see if he's live in my followings. I don't see
He
him.
wasn't before we went live.
Yeah. So maybe we'll see Illy go back to Illy tomorrow officially, or maybe not. Maybe he'll stick with this. But on a more serious note, I do think um even if Yoda isn't necessarily the answer, it wouldn't be the craziest thing for me if Illy did seriously want to decide to go for a rebrand, or just try and switch things up. Kind of just like from a narrative perspective, I guess, thinking about what happened over the past year, all
Yeah.
the rumors and everything like that. If he wanted to just put that behind him and get a fresh start with a new name, like, that's not the craziest idea I've ever heard in the esports landscape. So would be interesting from a legacy uh standpoint, just from the name alone, though. That name Illy is, I mean, it's a cool name. And um obviously he won a Call of Duty World Championship with that name, but at the same time, you're talking about Crowder, right? Crowder won his world championship as replays, but now he's won one, or does he have two? No, he's only got one
Yeah,
as
he's one.
Crowder. So yeah, I mean, it's been done before, but yeah, overall, not a huge fan of the name change in general. I like Illy more, but if this is serious and is something Illy is deciding to go with moving forward, it's not the craziest idea for me that he wants, like, a quote unquote clean slate, or fresh start.
Yeah, I was really trying to think of more people that have changed their names, and there's just not many. I mean, like they're shortening and like kind of different alterations. Like Scump used to go by Scumper Jumper and that kind of stuff, but like that's yeah. So there's not really a great precedent of guys changing their name and figuring it out and being successful after it. Completely different situation. I don't want to compare these two, but when you were talking about how like Illy wants like a clean slate, it's kind of like Kobe going from 8 to 24. Like they're kind of there's like a definite demarcation line for Kobe's career before and after. So I mean, it could be something like that. I think he should just go by Illy or Ender. Obviously, that's his real name. Like those are the things that people know him by.
Yeah.
But we'll see. It's really not the biggest deal either way, really.
Nah, and that's at the end of the day. I mean, you brought up the Crim 6 and C6 thing, and that was like, I really didn't think that was like a serious thing. And I remember, even because when we were talking about like writing and editing articles back then for that, I'm like, we're still writing out Crim 6. Like, I don't know if he's just shortening it. I'm pretty sure it came out too, like, maybe he said it on the flake or something. He wanted to do it so that it like shortened the name that appeared above his character's in-game model, so like it was less for them to see, because obviously that's only two characters as opposed to 7 in Crim 6. I could just be tripping and not remembering that correctly, but I'm pretty sure I remember hearing something along those lines. But regardless, I think similar to the Crim 6/C6 thing, I think even if Illy does change his name officially moving forward, there are still going to be a majority of longtime fans who would refer to him as Illy and Ender, like you said.
Yeah, I think that's just the thing that happens really. There's just no way to get that out of people's brain. Like if Parasite, for whatever reason, wanted to change his name to something, People are still going to call him Parasite, or they're going to call him Haggy. There's literally no other names that they would call him by. Another thing, this isn't actually like old news. This is actually as current as it gets. Something that's happening right now is Kaysen is hosting a $4,000 S&D 8s on his Twitch channel. So every pro put up $250, and it's all these CDL pros, Abizi, Draza, Scrappy, Hydra, etc. The Optic guys put up $250 each, $4,000, and I think so. You put in the notes that it was Kenny, Shotzi, Ghosty, and Envoy versus Draza, Abizi, Kismet, and Hook in the finals. So obviously, by the time that you're listening to this, the podcast, if you were wanting to watch it, you can probably go back on Kaysen's stream and watch it. It'll be over by the time you listen to it. But this is this kind of stuff that we talked about pretty recently. This is the stuff that the CDL should be doing, and I'm not saying they need to ice Kaysen out. Like, say, hey, Kaysen, would you like to host this for us? And we can throw you a few dollars or something along those lines. Like, we just want to be involved in this or put it on our channel so people can watch it. But yeah, I think this is something the CDL should be taking note of and hopefully get involved in the future.
Dude, I don't even obviously I just saw this is going on right now as of 12:40 Eastern on January 16th. So I don't really know too much about what's going on with this, but I don't even know what Kaysen's actual role in this is outside of just potentially streaming it if the players are the ones throwing out the money. It has nothing to do with the CDL saying, "Hey, Kaysen, you want to host this?" Host what? If the pros are just playing with their own eights money, and it's not like he's matching the money or something, as far as I know. So I don't even know. It seems like maybe all the pros sent him the money, and he's just holding on to it to give. I don't know.
I think maybe he just said "Do you guys want to do this?" And they were like, "Sure, that's fine."
So end of the day, there's nothing stopping the pros really from doing this as far as we're aware, and there have been those talks at least earlier in the CDL era of the less involvement of money eights, and there was the whole phase where players were saying oh, we'll play for 50 handshakes or 50 fist bumps or whatever it was. If now we got pros throwing $250 and it's publicly stated that that's what's going on, I don't see any reason why this sort of stuff. I mean, you could even do it for less than $250 a night and just have something like this happen regularly or semi-regularly or maybe twice a week. I don't know. It was definitely an encouraging sign, I would say, especially like you said, it's something we talked about, just more content, more stuff to get out there, especially in the wake of potentially some teams not wanting stream stream and all that stuff. This could be a potential answer. So we'll have to see if we see more of this going forward or not.
Yeah, and Kaysen put in a follow-up tweet. He said, so he tweeted out his stream link. So I'm, assuming he's in Codcaster or whatever. And then he said, also, everyone should be streaming their own POVs. So, nice. This gives everyone an opportunity to make content and be a part of something, kind of a community event. And like you said, the CDL, if they were to get involved, can just say, we're going to do this on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. We're going to give you a Monday off because it's the beginning of the week after the matches. Everybody can kind of get away from it for a little bit. And then, we're going to start these S&D 8s at 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. after these teams are done scrimming, because they usually scrim during the day or, in the afternoon. And, we're just going to do something fun for the community. Sometimes we're going to do S&D 8s. Sometimes we're just going to do hardpoint 8s, so on and so forth. It's something. And like you said, the CDL, I think it would be nice to get Kaysen involved because he's been part of, he did the tournament before the CDL season started. He's doing this, so he's making an effort to kind of be a community member that's doing these things. So it would be cool if they got him and Zuma or Scump or anybody involved. Do you guys want to host this? Do you guys want to just be involved somehow? I think that would be something to to strive for the CDL, and hopefully it happens. We'll see, but it's nice that
Um,
they're not punishing these guys, at least for the moment. I guess we could wait and see if people get fined tomorrow morning for this, but it seems like the CDL is relaxing their rules about money eights and like kind of the betting aspect of it, even though like it's all kind of betting in a way because you're playing competitive Call of Duty online. Like it's a calculated bet in the end of the day.
I'm just gonna read the case on tweet because I didn't read the full thing, admittedly, and it kind of goes a little more in depth of what we were just saying too. So his tweet from January 14th: S&D 8's Pro Tournament winner takes all tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern. So it started around 4-ish hours ago at the time of recording. Each pro is putting up 250. Some may raise the stakes. So that's where, maybe that's like the fine line where it gets in, you can get away with it. And you could say, oh, we weren't playing for money. And maybe that's how they skirt some of this. But then next line, going to try and get these going every Wednesday. I'll be on Codcaster and I'll run an ad-free stream for you guys. So
Good guy.
if this is going on every Wednesday, I think that's just a massive W, and that's definitely something I will be tuning in for too going forward. And we might have to um do the podcast around it a little bit because
Yeah,
if that's going on, it might be fun for us to watch, and we could even talk about some of the stuff going on in that and whatnot. But um end of the day, yeah, I think this is it's really good to hear this is potentially going to be a thing going forward.
for sure. And obviously, like, uh, it should be noted, like the people that really try to help out the community, those people should be applauded and praised as much as possible. Because especially like we come off the heels of like this era of Call of Duty esports and esports in general, where we had people flooding in to like try to make as much money as possible, and then they left like because they got bored or they didn't, they thought this would be like a get rich quick scheme or something, and they left, and like we're still left with the pretty much the same people that we started with. So someone like Kaysen, who's making an effort to try to host these community events, that's awesome. I hope to see more of them, and like you said, if it's every Wednesday, we should be seeing more of them. Let's talk about these matches going into this weekend. We haven't had qualifying matches in over a month, if I'm not mistaken, or right around a month. But Friday, January 17th, we're going to have 3 qualifying matches. Saturday, we're going to have 3. And Sunday, we're going to have 3. On Friday, January 17th, we start off with Cloud9 New York versus the Los Angeles Gorillas Mate. LAG obviously has not won a match so far this season. They even lost in the first round of the minor last weekend. So I'm going to go with C9, although I do think LAG is still better than the 0-6 record, or no, yeah, it's something like that, 0-5, I believe. I think they're better than that, but they kind of have to prove it at some point, so I'm going to go with C9.
Yeah, I'm going with C9 too, and I think, is still worth mentioning the asterisks around the C9 online matches and potential server issues and whatnot. But just based on what we've seen so far, you expect C9 to show up and take care of business here if it's, a good connection day or good server ping for them. Um, but yeah, I think there's still this General Mates team has too much potential and too much talent to stay winless for long. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were able to sneakily grab a win here. But I still think Cloud9 takes this one.
I don't think we really need to talk much about this. Optic versus Vegas. This is a rematch of the first round minor match. I know we were talking about like the hard
Yeah.
point. I don't know. Xnid maybe gonna reset his record.
All I'm saying, X did drop 60 this week. It could be the time, but no, yeah. In all seriousness, I expect Optic to win this. Once again, we just saw them 3-0 this matchup, and that was in a match coming off of a break where Optic literally still won with a guy dropping 52 kills. So I will expect Xnin to not drop 52 kills map 1 and probably drop a more reasonable number and probably a less close score in the map 1. But who knows? I wouldn't be surprised though if Optic didn't play Vault Hardpoint again just to avoid that possible scenario of Xnid just popping off and actually getting the win this time.
Yeah, maybe he'll drop 48 this time, and they'll lose by, I don't know, 15. Minnesota versus Toronto on the final, in the final match of Friday. Another rematch from the minor. We saw this in the second round.
Yep.
Minnesota pulled off the upset. I'm still going to go with Toronto. That was a very close
Yep.
series, if I'm not mistaken. And I, believe that Ultra in general are the more talented, further along team as well, with Minnesota. So I'm going to go with the Ultra.
Yeah, I put in the chat. I think this is going to be the best matchup on Friday. I'm really looking forward to this one, and those who listened to the last episode or the minor recap. Um, I still obviously massive credit to Minnesota for pulling off 2 reverse sweeps in the minor and pushing into that top 4 for that event. But I do think there's just because of that reset in map 4 and then the delay ahead of map 5. I don't want to say there's an asterisk on the win, but there's something in the back of my head saying like maybe if that doesn't happen, Toronto just wins this series, and that's why I'm really looking forward to this rematch. I think it's really cool, just the way it works out that we get this rematch so close to when it last happened. I think Toronto's going to be having that same mindset too, like we got to come out and just beat these guys because we think we should have beat them last time, and obviously I don't know if that's actually their mindset, but that's what I would be thinking if I was on Toronto's side after playing them and being up 2-0. They had Toronto was undefeated in S&D before the Game 5 loss to Minnesota, so they're going to be looking to get back on track in S&D and show that they're a really strong S&D team. And I think Toronto takes this one this time around, but I'm really excited to just see this match nonetheless.
I think that C9 LAG is probably the most interesting matchup for me, at least on day one, because LAG, they need to get their first win at some point. I think they've lost 3 Game 5s now of the 5 matches they've played, and one at least was around 11 as well. C9, like you mentioned, who knows what happens with the online stuff, if that's going to play a factor. They've looked up and down. They got reverse swept a few weeks ago, or a month ago now, by Carolina. I think that was the first reverse sweep of the season. So like there's some holes in C9's game. There's obviously holes in LAG's if they're 0-5 or 0-4 in the qualifying matches and 0-5 in total. So that's my most interesting matchup, but I'm also biased. I just have a lot of faith in LAG, and they just at some point are going to need to prove it if I'm going to keep believing them and believing in them, I guess. Saturday, January 18th, first matchup, Vancouver versus Vegas. Both of us are most likely going to go with the Vancouver Surge.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Vancouver, but I mean, this is definitely just like, ooh, I feel like we still need to see more from Vancouver. At least I feel that way. Both Vancouver and Vegas were the only team to not win a map in the minor. So we haven't seen much from Vancouver recently, and just overall, it feels like it's been like I don't know. I feel like I just haven't seen a ton out of Vancouver in general in terms of actual quantity of matches or maps played. So still looking to see more from them. I think this is a match that they should be looking at on paper as one they have to win and one they should win. But I also think at the same time Vegas is looking at this one as a winnable match for them, right? In a field of other matches or a sea of matches that haven't felt winnable or looked winnable on paper. This should be one that Vegas is like, hey, we got a shot. I mean, Exnid comes out dropping a 50 bomb against Vancouver. I think they got a stronger likelihood of beating Vancouver than Optic there, right? So will be interesting to see how this shakes out, but I will go with Vancouver for pick 'em.
Depending, this is kind of based on opinion, but this could be the easiest match that they've had so far this season. Talking about Vegas, they played Carolina in their first matchup. Obviously, Carolina has proven to be very, very good, and then they played Miami, and so that's the only comparable match I think at this point.
Sure.
But they lost 3-0 to Miami, and then they played Toronto, Atlanta, and Optic. That's been their 5 matches so far this season. I would say that 4 of those 5 have proven to be among the top 5 teams in the league, which is pretty incredible how that worked out for Vegas, and not in a good way. But they're going to have to win. I think they're going to win at some point. This would be a good spot to do it. This definitely seems like the most plausible place for them to win their first match to this point in the season. Next up, we got Miami versus Cloud9. I'm gonna go with C9, but I'm very interested in this matchup. I think that Heretics are they're decent, and I think they could give Cloud9 a pretty hard challenge. Who are you going with?
I'm gonna go with Cloud9 too, but most notably, we mentioned it for C9's first match. As far as I'm aware, Miami is actually playing out of Florida. At least I'm pretty sure
I
they
think so,
did
yeah.
last year. And they definitely did when they were Mutineers. I actually don't remember last year if they did or didn't play out of Miami, but I think they did. So regardless, if that is the case, that is LA versus Florida, literally across the country. So could be some server issues there. But I will still go with C9 here. I think they're the better team if everything is even footing. But we could see a Super Saiyan Real performance that carries Miami to a much needed win. I'm gonna go with C9 regardless.
And then next matchup we have Boston versus Carolina, which is
Banger.
honestly like you don't really know what to expect with Boston. I mean they have gone to Game 5 still. They are still on their streak. They've gone to Game 5 in every single series, including the minor that they lost to Optic Texas in Game 5. I mean, I'm going to go with Boston just as I think that Carolina should win. They are the more talented team. They've shown at the higher level. They obviously beat Optic, who beat Boston. They beat C9 New York at the minor. They're undefeated in these qualifying matches. But Boston is kind of feisty. They're always an underdog, it feels like, and they've been able to pull off a few of these upsets so far. So I'm gonna go with the Breach.
Are you locking that in? Final answer?
Sure, I don't know if there's something I'm missing or not.
I think you are forgetting the major elephant in the room
Oh
here.
yeah.
This is the slasher revenge game against Snoopy. So
Well, the way I look
one
at it is this is the Snoopy revenge game against Slasher for the slander he had to. I think it might be libel. I'm not sure. I forget.
yeah. But yeah, give me Carolina and give me Slasher to drop a 1.8 KD and have the nastiest tweet on the timeline after the dub.
Snoopy should shoot Slasher's body and then tweet after the game is like, I don't even know what map we played. I was lost. Sunday, January 19th, starting off with Toronto versus LAG. Gonna go with the Ultra. They're one of the better teams.
Yeah.
LAG hasn't proven it yet.
Yep, same.
LAT versus Optic, the HBR Classic. Nade shot, he's cracking the whip, so to speak, on his boys. They haven't gotten off the game since Sunday night. I feel like they might fatigue out because of that. Like, that's a lot of Call of Duty to be playing. I'll go with LAT, but this is one of the most exciting matches at this, especially because of Nade Shot's comments and the way that LAT lost their first match this season, even though it doesn't count toward the standings or anything. But the fact that we saw some vulnerability from the Thieves last weekend, Optic, we saw some vulnerability. We've seen it a few times at this point in this season. I just think it's really, really exciting to watch these two. But I'm going to go with the Thieves.
Yeah, really excited for this match, and I really did go back and forth internally a little bit on who I wanted to pick here. I did come close to picking Optic, but I'm just going to stick with my gut and go with LAT. I think this is going to be a good match nonetheless, but I think the fact right now that I could see it going either way and I was debating it just speaks a little bit to the current state of LAT and obviously just how highly we thought of LAT coming into the season. And then it's just crazy how one loss in the minor to a good team in phase who, even if they weren't playing well before the minor, like still super talented team. It's crazy how one small loss like that can just shift everything. And I don't think it's, again, major red flag or anything, but I think it was like first blood, right? It just showed LAT is vulnerable. Like we're saying, like Vegas can and will eventually win a match. Like not every team is unbeatable. That's undefeated right now, and they're gonna lose eventually, even if they're as good as LAT. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go with LAT here. I'm really excited for first HBR Classic of the 2025 season, and yeah, I really hope it is a banger. But I do think in general, like this is a good time for Optic to catch LAT, right? Like they're not getting them at a time where they're on a roll and the opening qualifiers. It's after a break where we're hearing there might be stuff going on, like with kicking the rust off in scrims after some visa stuff with Hydra and all that, yada yada. Um, so we'll be interesting to see how serious some of the players. Obviously, we said when we were talking about the case on eights thing, like these guys are playing in that, and they're obviously putting in the work now. So will be interesting to see what form LAT shows up in. But I'm excited to see this match, regardless of who ends up taking it. At the end of the day, should be a good one. Probably goes game 5.
To your point about, somebody's got to lose at some point, or like a team like LAT, for example, has to lose at some point. The match they lost doesn't even count toward their record. So they're technically still 4-0 this season. And I looked it up because the most dominant team in a regular season that I can remember in the CDL era was 2021 Atlanta FaZe, and they went 34-7 in the regular season. And they were running through teams like left and right, and they still lost 7 matches. So I don't think it's anything big that LAT lost. I made fun of it last weekend when we were talking about Nadeshot's reaction to the loss. I think it's pretty ridiculous, but I'm sure they are pretty motivated to come into this week and to try to get the win, especially against Optic. There's always a rivalry there, and sometimes it's been more friendly than kind of hostile, but Scrappy kind of makes everything hostile, so I think this might be a real rivalry again. So I'm going to go, we're going to go with LAT, and it's going to be pretty interesting regardless. And the final matchup, and it makes me question, because we went through this stretch last season, if you remember, where the last match of the week was always one match that didn't really make sense why it was the last one. And then they ended up being the most exciting, most ridiculous matches you've ever seen in your entire life. This is kind of that match, Atlanta versus Minnesota. You would think of all matches, LAT and Optic would go on last, but here we are with FaZe and Rocker. I'm expecting a banger just because that's kind of how things go sometimes in the CDL. But I'm going to go with the Atlanta FaZe. They are, we saw a glimpse of hope, so to speak, last season or last week at the minor. I have to think that they're going to be able to keep the ball rolling a little bit. Maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe they'll suck again in the qualifiers, and it'll just turn into something we have to talk about, whether they're only good in the tournament setting and not very good in the online qualifiers. But I'm going to go with FaZe.
Well, it's also we just saw this match in the top 4 too for the minor, and Atlanta won that 3-2. Really close series. Literally, you can argue the least close map was the game 5, and that's a 6-2. Both hard points were within 40-ish points. The control went to around 5, and the first S&D was a 6-4, so it was really close series. It's one I could see, Minnesota catches FaZe sleeping, kind of like you said, or FaZe comes in a little slow. Could see that Minnesota shows up. They could catch a dub here, but I think I'm going to go with Atlanta too. I just feel like going back to that qualifiers where it's awesome. Atlanta won the minor, got those points for later in the season, but their eyes have to be set on trying to get into winners bracket for Major 1, because they just you don't want to start in losers bracket for Major 1. That's just not how you want to get the season started. So this is almost a must-win match as far as early in the season qualifiers go. So give me Atlanta here.
Yeah, Minnesota also, I think they would have lost 3 consecutive qualifier matches, if I'm not mistaken, because I think they won the first 2 and then they lost their last 2 before the break. Obviously, the minor didn't count toward that record, so they are also in danger if they lose this match of starting in the losers bracket if that trend continues, which would really suck for them, because they're a team that needs more matches in general together, and even one more match in the major could make a pretty big difference, in my opinion. I also should mention that we didn't bring up with LAT and Optic, but the whole scrim controversy stuff with Shotzi and them was, I think, based on the LAT. So I don't know. It just there's always rivalries in the CDL, and it's better when it's the big teams too. We got a few rivalries if we're being honest this week, like LAT Optic, you talked about the slasher Snoopy stuff in Boston, Carolina.
I'm so excited for that.
So Vegas versus Optic, obviously Exned really holding a grudge from this past weekend. I would also hold a grudge against Optic for dropping, what'd you say, 52 for the loss. That would piss me off. So maybe he's gunning for them this time. You put in the chat the qualifier standings to this point in the season. So just a refresher, we've kind of mentioned it, but it's good to just run through it real quick. So at the top of the standings, there's a 3-way tie for first place. All teams are 4-0. Carolina Royal Ravens, LA Thieves, and Toronto Ultra. Then Boston and Optic are tied for fourth at 3-1. Boston would hold the tiebreaker in that scenario because they won the first matchup against Optic. Then Minnesota is in sixth. Then there's Miami, Vancouver, Cloud9 New York, and Atlanta FaZe in a 4-way tie for seventh place. So based on the tiebreakers, I'm not sure if the CDL has updated, like if the way that the CDL formats this, I'm not sure if it's in order of like who would get in over who. But if it is, then Miami and Vancouver would get the last two spots in the winner's bracket of the major, and then C9 and Atlanta FaZe would drop down to the loser's bracket, and they would be joined by the 0-4 LAG and Vegas Falcons. So I think everybody has a chance, notwithstanding Vegas, but everybody else has a chance to get into the winner's bracket at this point. Even LAG, if they were to win their remaining matches, I still think they'd probably be able to get into the top 8. That's, we'll see how it works out. But I think it's pretty fun at this point. We get to see, and especially if you're going to fly across the Atlantic Ocean, I believe, you're going to fly across into Europe. You definitely don't want only one match in Spain. You certainly want to at least have a shot in the winner's bracket. So it should be pretty exciting these next few weeks as we close in on Major 1. To remind you guys of our pick'em, so I had a pretty bad minor. Bink had, I think a pretty good minor, all things considered. 24-11 on the season. That's your record. I am 19-16, so 5 games back. Definitely not the start I had last season, but it's not how you it's not how you start, right? It's how you finish. Yep. We're scaling, as our beautiful merchant vessel would like to say. So that does it. We're about an hour in. Make sure to subscribe, follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening or watching on. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and we're also on YouTube. We've been uploading daily videos for the last month or so. So on Thursdays and Mondays, those are when the full podcast episodes come out. So that is the video for that day. And then the other 5 days are clips from the individual podcasts. So that's kind of how we've been doing things. I think Bink said that the Shotzi video that we did, so we talked about Shotzi and the scrims and stuff on the last episode, and he said that video did pretty well in particular. So I really appreciate you guys for giving that some love. I think we're up to 190 subscribers on YouTube. I would love to hit 200 subscribers before Major 1 or around that time. And at the rate we've been growing, I think that is a realistic goal at this point. You can follow us on Twitter at jbink with 2 Ks, at Pres Byers. Podcast Twitter is at Ego Chall Podcast. And Bink, I believe, has been streaming on Twitch for the last week or so. Is that jbink with 2 Ks as well?
Yep.
So that's twitch.tv/jbink with 2 Ks. He's been streaming, I believe, League of Legends on his stream. So if you want to tune into that, please do so. We will be back on Sunday, January 19th, to kind of talk about all of these matches from this week of the qualifiers, kind of wrap up the week, talk about any news and notes that have happened from Wednesday night, or I guess early Thursday morning as we're recording this, and Sunday evening. And we look forward to seeing you there, or you seeing us here, I guess is the way to put that. But we really appreciate your support, and we hope that you guys continue to come back and listen or watch, and continue to support us however you can. So that does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yeah, thank you guys, especially for all the support. Shout out Preston again for um all his hard work with the YouTube channel, daily videos. It's awesome to see all the success those videos are having and translate into, some solid viewership on the streams and whatnot, especially YouTube. We got VVS Wealth again in the chat. Shout out, man. That's two streams in a row. I've seen your name, so thanks for supporting us in the YouTube stream and all that good stuff. Um, yeah, like Preston said, I wasn't gonna bring it up on the podcast just because I can't stream Call of Duty right now, but I have started streaming League of Legends on my own Twitch just because I'm doing a challenge with one of our other buddies who used to work with a while ago to see who can play the most League of Legends games this year because the new season started last Thursday for ranked play in League of Legends, and it's I'm off to a strong start right now, but I'm gonna keep on seeing how long I can keep the streams up. So far, haven't missed a day, but um, also a benefit of not having a job right now. So we'll see how long that lasts. But if anybody is looking for any League of Legends low elo League of Legends gameplay to laugh at or watch in whatever fashion, come on over to twitch.tv/jbink, JBINKK. I'd appreciate any support there too. But more importantly, thank you for the support on this podcast, and I appreciate much more support here because this is much more important. And yeah, we're in the swing of things here. We got some matches coming up this weekend. Can't wait to break those all down for you. 2 more weeks of these online matches, then we finally get some land stuff, and that's going to be the real banger and interesting that'll really get the ball rolling because again once we get to that land we'll inevitably see some roster changes most likely after the first event with the big question looming around Pred whether he will actually be returning after Major 1 or not. So a lot of stuff to look forward to coming up, and we will hopefully see you guys here along the journey just in general. But thank you guys so much, and yeah, can't wait to see you guys and hopefully it'll be a good one. So as always, remember to